Hello, I'm Enzo, and today I'll be playing Gregtech New Horizons. This is part 6, and oh boy, I would get a snack or a drink if I were you because I have a ton to cover in this episode. It's not even funny how much playtime I have. As a matter of fact, it's the most in one single episode out of all of my episodes so far. That's because my next Minecraft video is going to be another full Modpack playthrough instead of Gregtech, so I wanted to give you guys some more Gregtech to watch in the meantime. Alright, getting started. As you can see, I've been making a ton of dark steel, like a couple dozen stacks of dark steel, as a matter of fact. So, why am I making so much, you wonder? Well, first of all, it's extremely cheap. It's just like steel, carbon, or coal dust, I guess, silicone, and obsidian dust. For how cheap this stuff is, the pipes you can produce with it are insanely powerful. These pipes are my best option, probably for a little while, especially considering they have a really good heat capacity as well. I have access to plastic pipes, which are decent, but their heat capacity is really low, so I can't use them for steam. These will be a great replacement for like Potin or anything else. On top of that, this lets me use a ton of oxygen that I have overflowing in storage, and that speeds up the recipe a tiny bit. Next up, I've been looking at this super cool recipe for something I've wanted to make for a while now. You see, I need a ton of leather so that I can make new backpacks and upgrade them, stuff like that eventually. The problem is I'm tired of having to breed and kill all of my cows. One option is to spend some coins to buy leather, but to make tanned leather, I still have to spend 4 for a single one, which is ridiculous. But with all of my resources, there are actually some really neat recipes that I can use to get tanned leather alternatively. For example, I can use phosphoric acid to make tanned leather for half the price. I can also now make artificial leather with PVC, aka polyvinyl chloride. To make PVC, I actually just need ethylene and chlorine, which I already have. The funny thing about all of this recipe is that I didn't do it in this episode. Maybe next episode, I guess we'll see. I didn't forget about it, I just had no reason to make all this stuff just yet. I kinda just want to note all of this for now, cause it will come in handy at some point. Far more important than that useless leather is actually Enderman. So, you're probably wondering why I need Enderman. I mean, it should be pretty obvious. I need Ender Pearls, because they're going to be useful for all sorts of stuff, especially later on. The primary issue is that I've actually been playing in Peaceful, and I haven't been fighting mobs that much. The best way to actually get Ender Pearls is by throwing them inside of my smeltery. They're going to slowly die, or melt in there. Probably not a good way to go, if I'm gonna be honest, but melting them down gives me liquid ender. And instead of just like a chance for 1 or 2 ender pearls, they are guaranteed to give me like 4 or something like that. It's really nice. So this is how I'm gonna get some more ender pearls. They can also still drop them on death, which is very nice. The only problem with this entire process is that I have to wait 2 hours between getting Enderman spawn eggs, and I can't really capture one on my own. I don't want to fight them either way. In the background, I've also cleared out the rest of that massive pit at the bottom of my base. As you can see here, yeah, that's the other 50, or 49 I guess, blocks I had to clear down. It was a ton of mining, but absolutely worth it now that I can finally finish up my base. At some point, of course. I don't need all of those extra floors just yet, but they're ready. After that, I decided to make another prospecting kit, and this time I've made it properly out of Damascus steel, which is currently my toughest material. It's also MV, so it works a bit better, I guess. Whatever, either way it's a major upgrade. Only now have I realized that I can actually just use this and click on rock, in this case netherrack, but normally stone or something like that, to actually prospect several chunks at once, which is pretty awesome. Using this, and of course my wonderful jetpack hang glider combination, I can travel all around the nether prospecting every chunk to see what resources I can find. There are some very rare resources that I've only found in a couple of chunks. I kind of want to get more of those, but one of the main things I'm looking for is emeralds. Emeralds are used in all sorts of things, And those veins also contain like beryllium and thorium, which will come in handy later, so it's definitely worth looking for them. You know, I'm still not 100% sure why I did that. I guess it might have been to get the emerald ore so I can process it and potentially get like the really good emeralds out of it for machine parts and stuff like that, like the emitters and scanners, something like that, I don't know. Anyways, the next thing I'm working on is making a ton of simple machine components. This is because I would like to make electrical pistons, since they're slightly easier than normal pistons and way more powerful. For the next major thing I want to work on, and it's like the single most important thing I'll do for a long time, I'm going to need a ton of barrels and their upgrades. Not barrels, I mean drawers, because drawer things, whatever, you get the point. I need a lot of stuff. To make these drawers way more useful, I have to add upgrades to them. I decided to use diamond upgrades because I have a ton of diamonds. I did not expect how expensive these things were gonna be though. It's 4 diamond plates per upgrade, which is a bit ridiculous. I have chewed through probably thousands of diamonds in this playthrough. I mean, have you seen my base? How it's just littered with diamond chests? That's a tiny bit of a problem. I really wish I had known earlier about a better upgrade recipe than this. You see, there are different tiers of upgrades, of course. I went with diamond because I thought that was the best option, but I'm pretty dumb. Considering I have stainless steel, the best option currently is actually ruby plates. That's actually tier 7. Tier 6 is emerald. I forgot what else you need there, but it's not as easy to get as stainless steel. Either way, yeah, ruby plates are the way to go. I have tons of ruby in reserve, and it would have been way cheaper and smarter to make those instead of wasting more diamonds. Which, yes, I did have to go mining for even more. I'm running out of diamonds fast. So, the big thing I'm working on is from a mod called Logistics Pipes. I've been doing a ton of research on this in between episodes, and there's a reason I'm going for this. I was originally planning for a different recipe before I learned about this one that uses reinforced glass plates. These are acquired by cutting up reinforced glass, which is relatively easy. I can make carbon plates by compressing the organic stuff that I make back in the same place as my benzene. So yeah, I have everything to make these, it's just gonna take a while. I need all sorts of different resources to make all the components for these things. Yeah, it's gonna take a while to say the least. But making these transfer pipes is insanely important, especially for this part. It'll probably carry me through a few more episodes, because the best way to explain this is like a very early version of applied energistics, where I can make this massive logistics network and just like transport resources everywhere between machines and stuff like that. You get the point. I mean, it's kind of in the name, you know, logistics pipes, it makes a lot of sense. But yeah, this is going to be incredibly powerful once I get everything finished. Back to the Enderman plan. You see, I made a ton of golden lassos to bring some of them back to my base from this spawner I found earlier on. Yeah, I forgot these are only for passive mobs. The problem is that these things cost ender pearls to make, so I wasted my reserve on making all of these. I thought it was gonna be a good investment, but I guess I'm just dumb. That is a major problem because now I'm out of ender pearls and I need to farm some even more from this spawner. However, that's when I had an absolute genius idea. Probably one of my best, honestly. Instead of bringing Enderman over to my smeltery, what if I just, I don't know, brought the smeltery over to them? There are other ways to capture mobs and everything, but yeah, this is an infinitely better idea, and it'll be way less trips back and forth between the two. It took me a while to get all the resources I needed to make all of this. I have a ton of fans over here, and of course the smeltery in the corner. As you can probably guess, when the Endermen spawn, they'll spawn in that little area, all of the fans are going to blow them into the corner, and they'll fall into the smeltery, get melted down into that beautiful liquid ender that I'm looking for. I placed a redstone clock and a casting table because I thought this would work relatively fast. I had no clue how ridiculous this thing would actually get. This setup, even though it's just a tiny little thing, produces so much liquid ender it's not even funny. So yeah, this is easily one of my best ideas ever. It's awesome because I'm basically not gonna have to worry about ender pearls, or liquid ender, for a very long time. This is gonna serve me for like ever, which is awesome. Especially once I get a bunch of like regenerating endermen in there, then it gets even more powerful. Overall though, yeah, this is a pretty awesome setup. I was creating so much liquid ender that it actually filled up that entire tank ridiculously fast. To solve this issue, oddly enough, I need ender pearls that I have to grind down into ender dust, combine that with redstone alloy, you know, redstone, coal, silicone, and iron to give me pulsating iron. This stuff has all sorts of uses, especially because, you know, it's an ender IO, but for now, I need this stuff to make special plates, which I can actually use to make something called the super tank. The super tank is a very cool special block that holds 4 million liters in a single block. Yeah, all the super tanks and super chests are very cool. Even though they seem a bit expensive at first, they are way cheaper than making like massive railcraft tanks of the same capacity. Absolutely worth it, especially for something like this where I need to transport it, because it also keeps its fluid contents, which is very nice. I have to say, this whole setup, the ender tank, it's all pretty awesome. The only tiny issue with the super tank is that when you pick it up, it actually gives you like all of the horrible speed debuffs. It's kind of like using a dolly to transport stuff, but even worse. Because the buffs, they aren't terrible for now. You know, they only last a little bit and then refresh. And then refresh if you're still holding the tank. You guys will probably see way later on. The fuller the tank, the worse the duration of the debuffs actually gets. You can get up to like 5 minutes of each of these. It's actually pretty horrible. I had to have milk on me at all times whenever I move these tanks around because it is painful. But now that I have like 2,000 plus ender pearls in a single tank, I'm just gonna put this by a fluid solidifier and start crafting them over time. This is wonderful. Another super neat thing I can do with all of this dark steel is actually upgrade my diamond chests even further, which is pretty insane considering they already have this massive inventory. I think I get an extra 27 slots or something like that. It's pretty insane. Unfortunately, these are twice as expensive as they should be because you're supposed to make these in HV tier, where you can actually make them in the assembler instead. So yeah, I mean, I have so much dark steel it doesn't even matter, but I wanted to note that. Still, this is a huge improvement, and I can store, well, 27 more items, which is very nice. I also happened to discover this thing called a matter cluster. This essentially happens when you break something that has a ton of items in it, in this case, you know, 8,000 pyrite ore, and then you can right click it to get all of that ore, and it kind of scatters everywhere. As you can see though, I'm in the process of sorting out all of my different items, and unfortunately moving them from barrels to drawers. This is also pretty important for the logistics pipes. You'll see what I'm gonna do a bit later on. The very nice thing about these drawers is that I can actually move them super easily. Instead of having to use the dolly to take them one by one, I can shift right click with packing tape, which is super cheap by the way. It's just paper and glue, which I have plenty of both at this point, and I can bring the drawer right into my inventory and move a bunch of them at once, which is very convenient. I was kind of worried about how that would work, but I guess drawers are just better overall by every mean at this point. Like, they're cheaper, the upgrades are cheaper and easier. Yeah, I wish I had known about the difference earlier. Another measure to save us both a ton of time, I'm not going to go into too much detail on how all the logistics pipe stuff is made. I'll explain how it works. Just assume it's a massive combination of all the resources I've been making up to this point, including a couple special things. For these specific pipes, I actually need chests. Well, copper chests, iron, and other higher tiers eventually for the better ones. You get the point. On top of that, I actually have to use the basic logistics pipes, not the unrouted ones, to craft stuff like this. Again, I'll get to that later on. Just know that I am working on all of this stuff in the background. Now that I've realized how infinitely better drawers are over barrels, I've started converting my entire base to drawers instead. The best case is definitely my log storage from my wood farm, and considering the ruby plates are extremely cheap, I went from 512 stacks maximum, that's with a ton of barrel upgrades, to 8,200 stacks. With just 2 ruby upgrades, by the way. I can still put 3 more in there, which is insanity. Yeah, drawers are just better all around. I really wish I'd known all this earlier on. One of the other nice things I got from having all of that ruby is the exquisite ruby, I think, that I can throw on the lathe to make this ruby lens. So, why do I need a ruby lens and this red alloy foil? Well, I need to make some very specific items to continue work with what I want. Long story short, this ruby lens, or any like red lens, I guess, can be used to make special like circuit prints. I don't know. Something like that. You can kind of see what I'm making in the bottom right, where I need all of these specific parts, but I need these red circuit things to make like stone circuit plates. That's from one of the other mods, so that I can make a specific item to make another specific item. You get the point. So I need these super specialized circuits to actually make what's called a drawer controller. This thing is pretty expensive, I have to say. Besides those complicated parts, it also requires an MV circuit. However, this is one of the most important items I'm making for my current project. Besides the logistics pipes, of course. You see, instead of having to put like one logistics pipe and all of its modules for each individual barrel or drawer, a drawer controller allows me to control up to 50 drawers with only one pipe, which is pretty awesome. It's a little complicated later on, I had to change some settings, but you get the point. Extremely important item. You guys haven't truly gotten to see just how complicated all of these parts are, which is probably a good thing. They also require stuff like dyes to make all of these cards, but look at this thing. This is the most important building I need, and just look at these parts. I require all sorts of insane things to make this, including a keyboard, display. Yeah, it's gonna be pretty horrible. That's one of the last few things I made. Thankfully, I already made the power junction, which was far easier, just like cables, all sorts of easy stuff. But yeah, I am scared of having to make the requester table. One of the major resources I actually need is green dye, which is not easy to make because I don't have much cacti. To fix that, I made a new crop manager. I placed it where I had a ton of wheat growing for hempcrete in the last episode, and I decided to place all of my crops. So I'm making cactus, cotton, and even some sticky reed, or sticky resin, which is pretty awesome. I feel like the longer I look at the recipe for this requesting table, it just gets worse. I have to say, the most insane item is actually the keyboard. I didn't expect the keyboard to cost 100 freaking buttons. I mean, I should have figured with Gregtech and all, but I was like, really? 100 buttons? I mean, that's realistic and all for a keyboard, but I didn't expect that at all. To make buttons though, it's not the worst, I would say. It's relatively easy to make stone slabs and turn those into pressure plates, which I just have to throw into the cutting machine again. It's not the worst, I have all the resources, but still, it's ridiculous. As you can probably guess, all the other things required a bunch of varied resources. Honestly, nothing can compare to the keyboard though. That's just stupid. At least everything is relatively easy. In the middle of this process, I may have gotten sidetracked, as you can probably see here. What am I doing with cherries and seed oil? Alright, cherries produce a decent amount of seed oil compared to most other seeds, that's why I'm using them, but why do I need seed oil? Well, this is another thing you can see in the bottom right of my screen. I kind of love how you can just tell what I've been looking at and what I want to make. I've seen this thing for quite a while now, but apparently it's a printing press, and in theory it should allow me to duplicate enchanted books. It sounds pretty insane, but just wait until I complete it. It's awesome. The only real issue with this entire crafting tree is that it costs a ton of seed oil to make all of the special wood and sticks. But that's not the worst part. I almost ran into a roadblock here because I need thaumium. However, I just happen to have 2 ingots like perfectly the exact amount I needed in storage. This is from exploring earlier on, but still, it's insane I had the exact amount that I needed. I would say that's the most expensive part because I can't make these currently. I'm not in Magic at all, but the 3 blocks of steel are quite expensive, I have to say. I really have no clue why I didn't just look in my storage because I think I actually have a Fortune 2 book already, but you can pay a stack of emeralds to get a Fortune 1 book that you can then duplicate. I don't entirely remember the whole process for this thing. I had to look it up. I don't know why they couldn't just tell you in here. They tell you everything else, but whatever. The main issue for me at the start was that I didn't actually have enough XP to duplicate this book. I've already done this in a previous clip, that's why it's not working. I do just need more XP. Pretty much, you place the chase, which is like the frame made out of those special sticks, and then you right click the enchanted book to get an enchanted plate. This setup is super annoying because you have to place everything in the exact right spot, so it can be a little annoying, but as you can see, it is awesome. Just for the cost of XP, which as you can see is stupidly easy thanks to my XP berry farm. Yeah, free enchanted books. It's insane. And yeah, each chase and plate gives you 3 books that it prints. 2 profit each time because you gotta recycle your first book. You get the point. It's awesome. I love this system. And since you're probably wondering why I'm making so many fortune books, it's so that I can start claiming more of my mission rewards and getting good stuff out of the loot bags. Hopefully. We all know my luck. I got all sorts of stuff. Most of it was junk. I mean, I'll probably use it eventually. But the most notable thing was definitely this creative tool modifier. This is pretty awesome. This is like the second or third one of these I've got. I absolutely love this reward. I haven't used this one. I still have another in reserve, but you never know when they might come in handy. I also got a bunch of seeds. This stuff is lead, which is very cool. Unfortunately, I never got any, canola or other sticky reeds that I'm looking for. I'll have to check again, but yeah, I didn't get either of those, which kind of sucks, but still, all sorts of decent stuff. So I've already set part of it up here. A lot of my footage is me attempting to figure out why the system is or isn't working. Alright, to start explaining it, I have some of the stuff set up over in my main area there, and this is where all the storage is going to be. As you can see, there are pipes connecting them, but here's the fun thing. A lot of the pipes are going to be unrouted transport pipes, that's just where items go through. However, some of them need to be basic pipes, aka junctions and turns and stuff like that. Some of them are going to be logistics pipes Mark II, as you can see here. These are going to be connecting the actual drawer controllers. They have 2 very special modules inside of them. Provider module, so that I can request any item inside of that, and then polymorphic item sync. This is for drawer controllers and stuff like that, where you have a ton of different items and different types. So I have a lot of these resources that I put into that chest there. That logistics pipe has extractor modules, so it's going to try and extract the items and put them into the network. But long story on why my drawers aren't being filled, even though the items obviously in the storage. Well, Gregtech actually puts a limit on these drawers or the controllers, I guess, and the controllers can only look out 5 blocks on each direction. That's why it can't interact with the drawers all the way to the left. Makes sense, I guess. It's also got a limit of 50. Thankfully, you can change these in the settings. I did change them just the tiniest bit for testing, because I didn't know how all this worked at the time. But yeah, that's like the most basic explanation of this thing. It'll just work when it's all done, you'll see. Alright, here's a way better example of it working. This setup looks extremely stupid, and yes, it does. But for some reason, the logistics pipes don't like to directly interact with the drawers. It has to be the controller. That's why I need a block space like that. Whatever, I don't care. This setup actually finally works, and I'm happy with it. This is awesome. Even now, after who knows how many hours of playing with these shaders, I still can't get enough of them, because I discover stuff like this. Look, the shadow's actually moving. Oh, it looks so wonderful. I still love this base design, trust me. It was one of my best ideas ever. While I was working on all sorts of various items for this network, I may have gotten a little distracted. You see, I wanted to upgrade part of my system so that it extracts resources and puts it in the network a bit faster. There's just a tiny issue. Well, I don't have everything I need to make the upgrades, and I need some specific parts. As a matter of fact, they're from Applied Energistics. And I only realized that's the right way to say it, like, very recently. I always used to say Energistics. I guess I didn't read it properly, ever. Anyways, I need to make a meteor compass to, well, go find some meteors. You know the funniest part? I'm only missing one of the templates, and I don't think I need it. I actually can't remember. But yeah, I am missing one, and that's it. For the longest time, I thought my meteor compass was just like really stupid or not working properly. I actually had to look it up to understand how this thing works. Apparently, it's based on whatever chunk the meteor is in. So this is the right way to hunt for meteors if you can't see them on the surface. I just dug down in the wrong spot. As you can see, this is a far better example. Unfortunately, the meteor can spawn like anywhere in the chunk. I'm not even joking. I found it on the edge of the chunk most of the time. But yeah, this is how you find your meteors. So I'm going to be doing this for a little while because the game wants to be funny and not give me the one template I actually want. It's given me plenty of all the other ones, but no, I can't have nice things. I don't actually remember how many meteors it took me to finally get the last one I needed, but look at this, I have so many of the other ones, and finally, I got the one I haven't gotten yet. That was ridiculous. But now I can finally head home and get work started, not on AE, but I need these to make some specific parts for my storage network instead. Long story short, the whole reason I wanted to get all these special plates is so that I could make some advanced chips to upgrade my modules. Of course, that's specifically the extractors to get those to go faster. I think I might have already just said that. I'm losing my mind. Either way, the whole reason I can't actually make what I want, the high tier ones, is because they require solar grade silicone. I mean, that's not a major issue. I can easily make that, but it's having to throw it in the blast furnace, waiting for it to smelt and then cooling it down. I really didn't want to do all of that. And I can't remember if I actually have the machines to actually process all of the chips and everything. I think I might need HV or something like that. Yeah, I couldn't do what I wanted, which kind of sucks. But I did get work done on a bunch of other items. And as you can see here, some other super important stuff like liquid pipes. Yes, logistics pipes can also work with liquids, which is very cool. If you guys remember near the end of last episode, one of the things I was working on is making drapes or curtains, whatever the things are called. I want to make dark glass so that I can see one way and light doesn't go through it. This is for one of the things I'm actually going to build in this episode, only part of it though. The main thing that sucks about this entire process is that it is extremely expensive. It takes a ton of wool and black dye. Thankfully, I still have those fish traps going, so I have plenty of black dye. And I used a paintbrush to make this recipe way cheaper, which is very nice. The wool is pretty difficult, but I have a ton of cotton growing right now. All that's left is to cut it down and combine it with glass. It's definitely not the worst recipe, but man, there are a lot of steps. I also decided to do a little testing to see if stuff like these micro blocks would work, but no, once they're chiseled down, it works just like normal glass. It has to be the full dark glass blocks, which really sucks. I would have liked to have more value for them, but oh well, very good to know. While I was going through the very slow and painful process of breaking down my old base, I figured something very bizarre out. Apparently, if you break glass, it actually gives you blindness and bleeding. I mean, I guess it makes sense. It's glass, you know, the glass shards are going everywhere, but man, I did not expect that out of nowhere. I guess the more you know. Every so often throughout this playthrough, I'll actually have an idea to go fix or upgrade something, and in this case, I was actually thinking about that pyrolysis oven. I'm almost at the limit of how fast my distillery can go, but I had a genius idea. Why haven't I added another generator to my pyrolysis oven? Because guess what? I can actually overclock it that way. It's not a perfect overclock, it's one of those imperfect, where it takes 4 times the power, but it doubles the speed. That's still going to be extremely helpful, changing it from 32 seconds to 16, which is a pretty massive change. And as you can see, it works. I'm pretty happy with that. I really don't know how I forgot about it when I first built this thing. I guess I just haven't tested it. There are a bunch of different pipe types, of course, but when it comes to liquids, I mean, I've kind of forgotten at this point, I'll be perfectly honest. But the ones I know for this setup are the basic pipes, which are on the left side, and the provider pipes, which are on the right side. Essentially, when the provider pipe has an output, it will attempt to provide liquid whenever it's requested by a requester pipe, or the... Okay, there's like 2 types of requester pipes. There's one where you can request it like manually by yourself. And then there's another one, oh, the supplier pipes. Yes, the supplier ones. You can choose how much liquid is in whatever inventory it's leading to, which is insanely good for stuff that you're gonna fuel with like power or steam. And the final pipe type that is very rarely used, but I think it's like the inserter or extractor. They do slightly different things. One is slow, but doesn't need a Gregtech pump. The other one requires a pump, but it's way faster. You get the point. And those ones are used when you're trying to put a liquid into the network. For example, benzene. You guys can kind of guess what I'm doing, where I'm always taking benzene out of my production area, throwing it into a super tank, and then providing it to the network so I can send it to any other tanks I want to make, and I'll use that to fuel new areas. It's a pretty awesome system, I have to say. After all this time, I finally decided to actually make a tank with the heat vents on each side. Apparently this is slightly overkill. I'm pretty sure like each heat vent has just like a chance to cool it down. I mean, look at that. It literally cooled it instantly without requiring any other heat vents. These other ones were kind of a waste then. I was really wondering how it would work, like if it was going to take longer with more coolant, but nope, it's just a random chance, and it went instantly. So yeah, that's how I'm going to cool all of my hot coolant back down, at least for now. I still won't be able to get the vacuum chiller or freezer, whatever I need, for a very long time, unfortunately. I decided to move my water over here, where my central water line still is, and added a lava tank. If you're wondering what this abomination of a setup is, well, this is a new steam boiler setup. This is because I am building a bunch of my steam machines back because they're still incredibly useful. Like, the early steam multi-blocks still have plenty of life left in them, trust me. This setup looks pretty stupid, cause it is. Basically, the lava boilers that I'm using, which I absolutely love by the way, they produce a decent amount of steam for how early you can get them. On top of that, they actually give you the obsidian they produce back, which is pretty awesome. This is way easier than using like the rock crusher, which costs redstone to make obsidian. Anyways, the problem with these things is that they have a water input, a lava input, and a steam output. Steam is on the back, water is on the sides, and lava is on the top, as well as hoppers on the bottom to get the obsidian out. So I have to be very careful where I put everything so I can get, all of the resources in and out. It's a bit complicated and messy, but hey, in the end, it works. Besides all the multi-block steam machines, I am also adding the steam ovens, which are also multi-blocks, I guess. Anyways, I love these things too much to get rid of. I mean, smelting 9 items at once is pretty awesome, especially when I have a little grid of 4 of them like this. That's 36 items at once. Well, every 10 seconds, but still, that is a ton of production. I love these things. Besides all the machines we've seen before, I upgraded the centrifuge and washing plant to steel, which was extremely expensive, trust me, but absolutely worth it for some basic ore processing. And I decided to make one other machine that the game doesn't actually recommend, but I saw and I needed it. It's called the alloy smelter. Obviously, we all know what the alloy smelter does. This thing is just an early Steam multi-block version of it. Did I need to make it? Definitely not. It's not the most useful thing I've ever made, but it will come in handy when I need to make tons of one specific alloy, like bronze or red alloy or electrum. So it is a very good build, just not the smartest use of resources. Still, I like it, so it's worth it in my mind. Besides ore processing, the macerator is extremely handy because I can actually use it to recycle all of the old blocks from my base. That's all of like the iron tanks, the steel tank, all the wrought iron pipes because wrought iron can be reused for some other recipes, all sorts of machines and stuff like that. It's pretty awesome. A lot of these blocks do actually give you the full value of their crafting recipe back, but some of the more advanced machines and stuff like that don't give everything. Still, I will take everything that I can get. And again, one of my favorite parts of Pack right there, just being able to recycle like almost everything. It's so nice. I was in the Nether for quite a while. I've actually had this pump running in the background that's been consuming a ton of lava. It's actually pretty awesome. I filled up like a couple of super tanks already. I also happened to find this super fascinating crafting recipe with soul sand. It would be a pain to get enough soul sand to do all this, but you get some very good resources from it, including oil. So that might be something at some point. Of course, I still have a ton of oil sands that I do have to extract. Unfortunately though, that's heavy oil, which means you have to process it differently. But yeah, I wanted to note that. And since I am shutting down the rest of my base, I actually ran out of hydrogen and oxygen for my ethylene setup. And it's funny because this setup was almost about to overflow with carbon dust. It's pretty ridiculous. I kind of forgot to add extra storage for that, but yeah, I did not anticipate it to fill, well, not that quickly. Honestly, I didn't expect it to fill up. I guess I should have, considering how many times this thing had to process, but still. Thankfully, I have a ton of diesel in reserve, which is very nice. I don't have to worry about remaking this setup for a long time. I also decided to test out a new design for an electric blast furnace setup. I've already made a 3x2 array. The primary issue is that those are only meant to support one energy hatch. I need to make a setup that has everything, including liquid input and output, and 2 energy hatches. Unfortunately, the largest size I can do that is a 2x2, and this is how it works. I'm extremely proud of this design and how it came out. It just barely manages to fit everything. I was doing all sorts of other stuff in the background, completing tons of missions, and of course making a ton of Canthal coils, because obviously I want to build that in my actual world. That was the entire plan. And yeah, it kind of looks like an abomination. You'll see it more later because I still need to put the fluid pipes in and the pipe network so that I can automatically request fuel. It's going to be pretty cool when it's done. But obviously I'm making this to both automate, well, kind of automate my blast furnaces and have more high tier Canthal ones so that I can smelt, well, higher tier stuff. I've actually been producing a ton of like Canthal and Tantalum in the background. The Tantalum is very important. I don't remember if I showed it last time or not, but it's used in making super good electronics and stuff like that. I think making the logistics network is one of my best decisions, especially for this run, just because of how much it lets me do. Besides being able to automate storage, now that I can automate like liquid storage, I can automatically put fuel into any machine I want, which is wonderful. And with a requester pipe, which I haven't actually made yet, I can automatically request a certain amount of gas to put into the system whenever I need to craft stuff with like oxygen or later on helium, nitrogen, stuff like that. It's gonna be pretty awesome. It's also, finally at this point, I decided to do some testing and figure out how these item filters work. Well, in this case, it's item type, because I'm trying to filter out like purified ore and dust so that I can put them in the right pipes, either, back to processing or into my storage system. They're actually not that complicated. In this case, I did have to use a conveyor belt to actually bring items into them, but yeah, they're pretty simple. They have a nice automatic output, and you can sort based on whatever type you want. You can even set it, well, easily by clicking with a specific item. There's other variants of this, like actual specific items, that will probably be useful later on. I've been going along and doing all sorts of just missions and random stuff like that. Earlier, I actually had to make more of the MV energy hatches because I kind of did a ton of stuff like way before I did the missions for them. Anyways, what's important here is actually making this green sapphire lens. Thankfully, I just happen to have an exquisite green sapphire. I'm pretty sure it's from the Twilight Forest, and I need that because I need to make another type of chip, or wafer, you know what I mean. I've already been making a bunch of these internal logic ones. That's one of the parts I need to make some circuits, but I'm going to need this to make another brand new type of wafer, which is RAM, or random access memory, as we all know. I love this blast furnace setup. It looks a little bit chunky and stupid, which it is, but like, there's no other way to make a system like this look good. On one hand, you can probably say I can hide parts underneath, but at the same time, that's going into the next floor, and I kind of want to keep everything separated between floors. For now, I'm actually using this setup to produce a ton of copper, because I think I need a bunch of red alloy or something right now. Either way, copper is always helpful to have. Of course, this setup produces a ton of carbon dioxide, but I wanted to test my entire logistic pipe network to make sure that it actually picks the carbon dioxide out of the system. And it does, which is just the greatest thing ever. I don't have to worry about any of the byproducts from the electric blast furnaces anymore. I love this setup. You know, it's really weird when I have to come back to my old base. Right now I'm working on scrapping more of it, but it just totally feels like a ghost town here, with all the holes in the floor where the old machines were. It's really bizarre, I have to say. But this starter base has served me very well, and it's given me a ridiculous amount of progression. I will likely come back and scrap this place even further to get like the concrete and everything else out of it, but yeah, a lot of the stuff is just gonna stay here until I feel like dealing with it, especially this area. It took me quite a while to get all of the resources I needed to make what I want, and this is a copter pack. These steel shafts are special and require a special type of mold. I can't remember exactly how to make it. It was a tiny bit annoying, but it's no big deal. The main issue is that they take like a minute, probably way longer. I don't know, it took a long time to make all these, that's all I remember. All that truly matters in the end is what I'm actually making, the copter pack. So I've had this available for quite a while now, but I finally decided to switch from my old steam jetpack, which I am retiring, but I'll keep in storage just in case, and I want to try out this new hover jetpack. It's pretty awesome. Unlike the coal jetpack, or steam technically, it actually uses burnable fuels like diesel, and actually lava I think it can do. But yeah, I'll be using diesel, since that's my best option. Sadly, you cannot use benzene though. I wish I could. You guys will see me use it a bit later on, but the most important thing to note about it is that it's not like the steam jetpack where I can use it on demand. Unfortunately, it has to be turned on or off whenever I want to actually use it, which has led to me taking fall damage quite a few times because I forget you actually have to turn it on. And when you use it, it's kind of like a helicopter. You fly up really slow, but there is a hover mode where you can stay still, almost like creative flight. It also gives you crazy good horizontal speed, which is awesome. I was planning to do a whole part on how I built this setup. All you really need to know is that it produces nitrogen. This is because it compresses cans and then uncans them to get, air, and then it centrifuges the air to get oxygen and nitrogen. Pretty simple setup. I know it looks complicated, that's because I'm using LV power on the top for the canners and MV on the bottom for the other machines. It actually doesn't look that bad now that I see it, and it works really well. This will just be generating tons of oxygen and nitrogen over time, which is very nice. I also made this whole setup. I brought a super tank full of oil and put that into my network, but I'm not producing polyethylene. I'm actually making refinery gas and then cracking that with hydrogen, oddly enough. Now, this is a very bizarre set of recipes that I'm doing here, but essentially I'm making this hydrogen, which requires hydro twice essentially, because I also need to make refinery gas out of sulfuric gas. Long story short, I'm actually making this entire setup to produce helium. Helium is another resource I'm going to need a bunch of later on, so I thought I might as well set it up early. Only issue is that this setup chewed through the rest of my hydrogen, which means I'm gonna have to automate that at some point too. Like I was saying earlier though, I've already done a ton of the missions that I'm getting to at this point, or at least done like the resources and everything for that. I have everything prepared and set up, which is very nice. Annoyingly, I need to make another electric blast furnace, which I'll be doing eventually either way, because I really don't want to pick one out of my array currently, since I'm always making stuff with it. It also requires me to make an MV muffler hatch, which is essentially useless because I don't have pollution. But yeah, not too much interesting stuff here because I've already made like all of this already. I guess the most notable part about all of this is some of the new special like diodes, transistors, resistors, stuff like that I'm making. These require all sorts of various stuff, including gallium foil to make some of the special ones. And I haven't made the new diodes just yet, I've been making standard ones, but I do have the resources to make surface mount diodes, which actually requires platinum wire to make. Alright, you're probably super confused. How do I get platinum? I've heard that the entire chain for platinum is like super complicated and crazy, but that's for later on. For now, I can actually squeeze out a tiny bit of platinum from nickel. Oddly enough. Of course, it requires a bunch of processing and I can only get it, I think, from the centrifuge at the end. But yeah, I've been throwing stacks upon stacks of nickel into my ore processing setup, and I've gotten a bunch of platinum out of it, which I have to throw into the electric blast furnace to get nuggets. I smelt those into ingots and eventually make wire out of them. Those white and yellow diodes, those are the special surface mount ones that require platinum. So yeah, I've been making a bunch of those, and of course all the other components I need, boards, fine gold and electrum wire, silver and tin bolts, all sorts of random components, but I have plenty of stuff to make them at this point. This is of course to make different types of circuits. You know, these are still considered LV ones, but they're not the original ones that I made earlier on. These are slightly different because they have obviously a different crafting recipe, and made only here, you kind of get the point. So you're probably wondering the main reason I'm actually making all of these different circuits. Well, besides the fact they're a bit cheaper, I mean, technically, the components themselves are more expensive, but I have more of them and they're easier to make at this point. Anyways, the real purpose of this entire setup is to make these. You guys see that right there? There's a brand new type of circuit. And that's exactly what I've been working this entire line to get. The final circuits require all sorts of other stuff, some new chips from wafers, annealed copper bolts, but guess what? They aren't just any circuit, they are freaking HV. That's right guys, I have finally managed to get into HV, which is just awesome. Of course, it's also terrifying at the exact same time because I opened up HV, and opening up a new tier is essentially like Pandora's box. There's like an infinite amount of new things to do. However, HV comes with some insanely cool bonuses. Besides finally getting an extra drop from the macerator, I can get some insanely cool stuff later on in this tier. You'll see soon enough. But trust me, it's gonna be awesome. The first thing I started working on, it's still gonna take a while to get everything I need, but I might as well get started because I have the resources, I just haven't had, the tier to make it at this point. Alright, I need to make a ridiculous resource called Elgin Steel? I'll go with Elgin. It requires Invar, Canthal, and iron, but that's actually the base. The second part requires silicone, carbon dust, and sulfur. This is an insane alloy, but trust me, it's gonna get more ridiculous very soon. Anyways, I'm going to need a ton of this stuff. It has all sorts of uses for so many items in HV, and I'm going to need a lot of it for what I'd like to make first. While I'm working on that, I also decided to take a very quick trip to the Twilight Forest and hollowed out a few nickel veins. Again, I get to show off the absolute perfection that is this logistics network by being able to dump all of my ores into the system and never have to worry about them. They're in storage, I can forget happily. I love it. Naturally, now that I'm in HV, all of the recipes for like everything are completely different. I need all sorts of new materials, a ton of steel stuff, as you can see, like steel screws, rotors, stuff like that. Then I gotta make all the stainless steel plates, rods, gears, everything. I need gold wires, which actually kind of sucks because I don't have that much gold in my reserve currently. I definitely need to make more. And on top of that, for some of the parts I need to make later on, I actually need chrome rods, which requires chrome ingots. I have to smelt those in the EBF. It's pretty annoying. But the extremely exciting part about HV is the fact I get to go to the moon very soon, which That's gonna be the coolest thing ever. And not very soon, it's probably gonna take a long time, especially considering I need the next tier circuits. Oh well, that'll be very exciting eventually, because I have a lot I'm going to need before I can even get close to making a rocket. Still, this is all very exciting to get another massive leap in progression. It took me a little bit to get all of the resources I needed, but they're not that difficult. I've already had everything I need to make it. As you can see, I have finally decided to retire my LV wrench. Yes, I've been using that thing the entire time, probably like a couple hundreds of hours of service on that thing, and it's still only at half durability. That's how ridiculous making it out of Damascus steel really was. But I'd say it's absolutely worth it. It would have been smart to make the MV one a bit earlier because that has way better speed, but this wrench has twice the speed of the LV one, which is pretty awesome. Also, can we get an 07 in the comments for the LV wrench, which has served me very faithfully? I'm actually quite surprised I didn't lose that thing, considering how many times I put it in machines to charge. Yeah, that kind of shocked me. I almost lost it for real like twice because I couldn't find it. In the end though, I managed to keep it. As a matter of fact, I later put it into my toolbox so that I can actually use it still to actually repair machines and stuff like that, which is pretty awesome. So it's not dead. The only real problem is that I don't have any HV machines I can actually charge it in just yet. Well, I do, but the macerator is usually being used. Still, I can get a tiny charge on it while it's running. To solve my current gold shortage, I decided to finally set up my oreberry farm, because I'm also pretty much out of ore as well. I could probably extract more gold from other stuff, but this is definitely the best long-term solution. The only problem is that these ore berries damage me when I touch them, which means I have to do all 3 layers at the same time, because 3 layers is the maximum size you can do for the crop manager and a farm like this. I don't know why I'm explaining it. You guys have probably seen last episode when I made the Benzene farm. It's essentially the same thing, just a bit more annoying. Thankfully, I quickly learned that you can actually use the builder's wand to quickly build out rows of the crops, which I didn't actually know you can do, and that saved me a ridiculous amount of time. So that is very good to know for the future. Last episode, when I was going over how I'm making dark glass, well, this is what it's for. I want to be able to see inside of my beautiful crop farms, and I can, which is super cool. Of course, these things have to be in darkness to grow. What kind of sucks is that the glass only looks good if I am holding a torch because of how the effects work and everything. So it's a tiny bit disappointing, I'll be honest. It worked out way better in my head, so I guess there's that. Still, at least the effect is kinda neat if I hold the torch. And I have to say, I absolutely love the new wrench I got. I think there's just one slight problem. It's a little bit too fast. I'm so used to the half speed of my old wrench, and I'd have to like hold click down to mine pipes like these, but this thing chews through everything instantly. On one hand, that could be very nice for deconstructing some multi-blocks. On the other, it can be a bit painful when I'm working with small pipes like this. But that is a price I am very much willing to pay for how powerful and useful this thing will be. The only thing that really sucks about a lot of the stuff I'm about to start making is that the game actually forces me to use a lot of HV machines. The cutter and laser engraver, I feel like there's another one I'm missing, but those are the 2 biggest examples for a lot of the stuff I'm about to make. It kind of sucks because I would like to use my old machines, but I can probably recycle those or use them for something else instead. On one hand though, it is a bit nicer because I get faster machines, but of course it chews through 4 times the amount of fuel. I also discovered this awesome new recipe to make silver grade silicone. Instead of having to deal with this stupid like salt and chlorine and then electrolyzing it at the end, there's actually a infinitely easier recipe. It requires hydrogen chloride, HCl, and you basically just put that in as a liquid with some cells and silicone. You throw that into another chemical reactor, and yeah, it's super easy to loop this entire process. You just have to recycle the cells and liquid, which isn't very difficult. It's automatic, which is awesome. Sure, the other setup was also automatic, but this is way easier and way faster, which is pretty neat. Alright, it's finally time to use this massive array of electric blast furnaces, but not for standard processing. I've had this super cool idea for something I want to make. You see, for the longest time, I've been making normal boules, I think they're called. That's what I cut up to make wafers and then further cut up to make chips. But I actually had the ability to make a special kind of boule now. It's like the second tier. It's called a phosphorus doped boule. Essentially, this requires hydrogen or helium, which I was producing earlier. The higher tier gas, the faster the recipe goes. A ton of phosphorus and solar grade silicone. The phosphorus I acquired from phosphorus pentoxide, which I got from centrifuging ash a long time ago. And yeah, I throw that in here and it should just work. The only problem with this setup is actually something I didn't think about too much. You see, at the bottom, I have 2 liquid inputs on this setup. I should have just done 2 item outputs instead, because the 2 liquid inputs are 1 on each side. So unfortunately, all of the gas was split between them. It's stupid. I don't know why I decided to change the design slightly to have 2 gas inputs instead of just 1. I eventually changed that way later on, but yeah, that's why it isn't working for now. I essentially just had to request another batch of gas so that it evens it out between the 2. Once I requested more helium, it finally started. Yeah, by the way, hydrogen takes 10 minutes instead of 9. Of course, higher tier gases, which I definitely cannot get anywhere close to right now, those make it go to even faster, but yeah, this is very exciting. I just seriously hope this thing doesn't break down. Because again, if any multi-block machine breaks down, has maintenance issues, power fails, yeah, you'll lose whatever recipe you're making. That would be tragic considering how expensive these things are. But thankfully, I didn't really have any maintenance issues in this episode. One of the coolest things I can actually make with HV machines is the chemical reactor. This gives me a ton of new recipes, including something fascinating: ender eyes. Yes, I have not been able to craft these things until HV, which is ridiculous. Normally you would like speed run these so you could get to the end and get all the fun end city, elytra, all that good stuff, but not here. It's taken me over like 380 hours to get these things. Of course, the recipe is just exactly the same, blaze powder and ender pearls, but obviously you need this special machine to make it. So why am I making these? Well, I assure you, I have no plans of going to the end. Just yet, at least. I definitely want to upgrade my weapons before that, but I need them to make some special parts for HV. This is also where I had to make those pesky chrome rods. I'm definitely running out of chrome, but I hope there's more ways to get it soon. Otherwise, I'm going to need to electrolyze a ton of ruby. Anyways, this is so that I could make the HV laser engraver, which is, like I said earlier, required to make a lot of new recipes, including the reason I actually need this amber lens. This is to make another brand new type of chip. You guys should get used to this. And this is called an SoC, or System on a Chip. It sounds a bit stupid, I know, but it's actually quite simple. I have to combine this with some other relatively basic parts to get a special type of ultra low voltage chip, which ULV chips have their uses in a ton of recipes still, so I need them, and it's a good idea to make them way cheaper than the stupid like steel rods that I need to make the vacuum tubes. That's just ridiculously expensive. This is so much better. Also, the chip that you saw there, it's not the final product. It gives you like a big chip, but you can then cut that down into smaller chips, and that's where you really get a ton of these things. I also completely forgot to mention this thing that I made earlier. It's a cover for the machines. I forgot what it's called. It's like a container of sorts. It can hold 15 items. There are lower tiers, but since I have stainless steel, I made the highest tier one possible. And these are insanely useful for machines like the laser engraver, where you have all sorts of different parts that you'll use, but you don't want to store somewhere else. And you can store them in a machine, pop them in and out whenever you want. It's pretty awesome. I have one on the extruder as well, where I store a bunch of my extruder molds. So yeah, that was a great find. I had to make both of these parts specifically for that mission and to get the laser engraver, but I can also use them to make the HV miner, which I absolutely will be doing very soon. Alright, but here's one of the biggest things I'm going to discover in this episode. Yeah, more multi-block revolutions. This is insane. Now that I have HV, there's so many more things I can make, including new, extremely powerful multi-blocks. This is the clean room, which I will actually be making in this video, considering it's essential for a lot of high-tier technology processing. And you guys remember those special phosphorus-doped boules that I was making earlier? Yeah, apparently I can only process those in a clean room, which really sucks because I can't use them until the end of the episode, but still, at least I have them and they're finished. But yeah, the clean room is very expensive and complicated to make. It requires tons of polyethylene to make the plastic bricks, and all sorts of other complicated resources. Oh yeah, don't even get me started on the item filters that are ridiculous. Besides that, I get access to a multi-block cracking machine, which is going to make oil processing way easier and more efficient, which is awesome because I need to do a lot of that very soon. I need like ethylene, PVC, all of the crazy resources. I need those, all sorts of oil products and stuff like that. Soon enough, I'm going to be able to make the implosion compressor. I've seen this for a while, and it's used to make a ton of things, including expensive rocket parts, which is fascinating. The chemical plant I won't really be building probably for a while, but it definitely has its uses. There's also like a multi-block chemical reactor. I think the chemical plant is different because it also has to do with like algae. That's its own tree. I'll probably be working on it at some point. And I'll get to some more of the awesome multi-blocks a bit later on. But yeah, the game is finally starting to get very cool, I have to say. I mean, no, I've loved it the entire time. I'm just saying things are getting crazier, like, by the hour. It took me a while to figure all this out, but I created this abomination. That's the only thing it can really be called. Long story short, this is a machine setup, and I have to have the item filters to recycle the cans so that they go in the electrolyzers first and then the can fillers second. But pretty much this entire setup takes benzene, I'm not even joking, and electrolyzes it. So why would I be wasting my precious fuel like that? Well, I'm out of hydrogen. That's the long story short. I need more hydrogen. This is the easiest way to get it besides just electrolyzing water, which honestly I really should have done instead. This setup does also produce carbon dust. That's why I actually need the item filters so I can get the carbon dust out of the system. That's nice because I could always use carbon. It has a ton of uses, but yeah, this is just to make a tiny bit of hydrogen, but it chews through my precious benzene, which I absolutely will have to make a new setup for next episode. Definitely expand my production quite a bit. I need way more fuel considering how much my machines chew through. I also discovered this name when I was looking at the other missions. The two red ones are just like checkboxes that unlock the missions for all the other ones, which have some really cool machines. Anyways, I read the name Tower of Babylon, and then I immediately thought something. So recently, I watched Nadia and the Secret of Blue Water. It's a pretty decent anime. I was mostly just there for the music and the Nautilus. And that mission is for the Distillery Tower, or the Mega one, which I'll absolutely have to try making soon, because that looks pretty awesome. But that kind of got me thinking, man, the Tower of Babel would be extremely cool to make. I mean, granted, it is one of the coolest things in the anime. For some context, it's like a giant particle accelerator tower, I think, something like that. Whatever, it drains up an insane amount of energy, fires this massive particle beam. While into space, it gets redirected by a satellite and vaporizes an entire island. It's pretty cool. Needless to say, the building itself looks really neat. I think making it would be very neat. Anyways, back to normal, well, insane recipes, I guess. I need a ton of different resources to make the next awesome thing. Unfortunately, it requires methane, or methane, and that is not the easiest to get. There are other ways to make it with like refinery gas and yeah, stuff like that. But the easiest recipe I actually have available is just throwing wood into a centrifuge. This is because I have like 30,000 jungle logs in reserve. I need this and a ton of other chemicals to go through this insane recipe chain to get a new material. And so, you see, I'm supposed to be making chloroform right now. That's a combination of methane and chlorine, but I had a circuit set in there I thought it wouldn't be a big issue, but apparently yes it is. And I accidentally made another chemical which is for something else. On the bright side, that will be useful. Unfortunately, not right now. I'll get back to what I was trying to make a little bit later, but for now, I have some incredibly important stuff to make instead. Remember that ridiculous steel that I was making earlier, the Eglin? Well, this is when it's actually going to come in handy. I need a ridiculous amount of this stuff, several dozen stacks. This is nowhere near enough, trust me. And I need this to actually build my first HV multi-block. That is actually the sifting machine. You see, I have a ton of ores that I can sift, but all of the other sifters are just so slow. What if I could build a machine that has tons of parallels? And actually 4 parallels per voltage tier. Now, I think I only made it MV. Well, I think I can maybe make the HV energy hatch. I just haven't. I really dread making those things. But you guys get the point. I'm gonna need a bunch of extra stuff to actually make this thing because I gotta make all of the hatches, input and output for it, and of course the casing and sifting blocks inside. It is quite expensive, I have to say, and it's gonna take a while to make. A while later, I finally have everything I need to make this ridiculous machine. And thankfully, it's not that complicated to build. It's 5 by 5 by 3, so relatively simple. And of course, it requires all of the classic blocks, controller, input, output, maintenance, muffler, all that stuff. And of course, power, which is, kind of important. You make the outside out of the casing. I guess that should have been pretty obvious. And you put the sieve grates in the middle. I mean, it's self-explanatory. The only slight problem I didn't actually think about when I built this is the fact I used the wrong output bus. You see, I was trying to use an LV one, but the LV only has 4 output slots. And this needs way more because, well, I can get a ton of different byproducts out of this. Either way, this is super exciting. And looking at it now, I realize I only put 2 generators. I seriously need to put 4 generators so I can get the overclock. Either way, this thing is extremely fast and powerful. I love it. And it's perfect because now I can throw away all of my other sifting machines as they are literally useless. This can do, I think it's 8 parallels currently. I don't exactly know how the overclock works with that. Maybe it just makes it faster. It doesn't add parallels. Still very exciting overall. When I was using this thing, I quickly learned something very important about it. For some reason, you have to have like the exact amount of resources in there. And by the way, I don't know why I said 8 parallel earlier. It is 12 parallel, but essentially that's how many you have to have for each individual operation. You have to have the exact right amount or else it will fail. So yeah, you get what I'm saying. It has to be divisible by 12, 3 stacks, 6 stacks, 12 stacks. That's generally what I use now. So yeah, very odd. And I'm not exactly sure why it really matters, why it can't process less. Very good to know. I've been grinding down a ridiculous amount of rubies to get plenty of chrome for all sorts of uses when I've discovered one very interesting thing. I can use the laser engraver to actually upgrade the rarity of certain rubies. Now, this is pretty important because the chipped rubies give small dust, so do the flawed rubies. What's the difference, you ask? Well, the flawed rubies can actually be converted into standard rubies, which give 1 normal dust. You see how it works here? The smaller rarities give tiny dust, which is 4 to 1 for small to normal dust, but instead the laser engraver upgrades 3 to 1, so it's a slightly better ratio. I'm just trying to save wherever I can because I need a lot of chrome, and there aren't many good ways to get it, unfortunately. You guys know another one of the greatest things about HV? I can actually electrolyze alumina, which is aluminum dioxide, I think. Anyways, I get a ton of this stuff from centrifuging and electrolyzing everything. The issue is, it's annoying to process because I either need cryolite, which is a waste of cryolite, or carbon, and it creates carbon dioxide as a byproduct. However, in HV, I can actually just straight up throw alumina into the electrolyzer, get oxygen, but more importantly, the aluminum dust at a way better ratio than any of the other recipes, which is awesome. By the end of this, I had way too much aluminum dust, but that's a good problem to have. I mean, I already have over 2,000 aluminum ingots, but I definitely will automate them later on. Who knows if it's going to be in the next episode or not. Either way, this is awesome. The next thing I need to make is a step towards getting the clean room and some other items that I really want. But the primary issue is it is ridiculously complicated. What I'm trying to make is called black steel, which confused me at first because I mean steel already looks black, but okay. It requires black bronze. Yeah, you guys can see where this is going. I need a ton of different metal dusts to make a bunch of different alloys. Like later on, I'm gonna make red steel, there's blue steel. It gets ridiculous pretty fast. I was originally planning to explain it in more detail, but I think that would just melt all of our brains together. Just know it requires a bunch of different metal dusts, and I have, or can easily get, everything I need. One of the other things I need to make for these bricks is actually concrete. I have almost everything I need to make it. I mean, it's pretty simple. The interesting problem is that I didn't actually have quicklime, I think, caco, calcium carbonate, or whatever. Thankfully though, it's not that difficult to make with some calcium dust or one of the other calcium dusts, whatever. And carbon dioxide. Convenient because I have millions of liters of that in storage. So it actually all worked out in the end. Besides the ridiculous crafting recipe for the black steel, I also have to throw it in the electric blast furnace, which kind of sucks because I'm currently processing a ton of stainless steel, and that takes a minute per item. It's technically half of what you see because, you know, I have 2 furnaces on each side. Still, I'm gonna have to pause production of this so that I can throw in my black steel and get that completed early. I need polyethylene pulp, which is relatively easy. You just gotta grind down polyethylene, which I have tons of at this point, and you have to combine it with black steel frames, which is just 4 rods. All relatively easy. Oh, and don't forget the concrete, of course. But yeah, now I just gotta make a ridiculous amount of these bricks because I need enough to make a 5 by 5 by 5 cube so that I can actually go inside of it and have a tiny bit of room to work with. Another big thing I'm interested in making is a field generator. Now, it's a little weird that I need these super high tier components to make an LV thing, but it kind of makes sense because this allows me to do some insane stuff. Unfortunately, I require red steel to make this. Red steel is insane. It requires black steel, normal steel, bismuth, which, yeah, I didn't even know I had bismuth. I'm guessing it's like a small ore, sterling silver. This is getting ridiculous at this point, honestly. But thankfully, I had the resources to make it, barely. I only have like 20 bismuth in total, and I need this red steel to make these plates to make the field generator. Makes sense. So yeah, the Super Tank 1 is cool and all, but the Super Tank 3, which I jumped up to because of that field generator, the second one requires like an energetic alloy, or, you know, whatever the green Ender IO alloy is, which is energetic. No, it's like Ender, or not pulsating iron, vibrant. There we go. It's been a while since I played Ender IO, as you can probably guess. Long story short, this thing has 16 million liters of capacity, which is great because now I can reuse that old tank and have even more room for oxygen storage. This is awesome. To extract some more resources from the nether, I decided to place down my HV miner in there for a while, and that got me extremely curious. When do you actually start to collect like cobalt and ardite with your miners? Like what tier? I've never tried an auto miner in the nether yet, so I legitimately don't know. But that is an incredibly useful feature, because mining it myself is annoying. I can't actually do it with my current hammer. I need that special pickaxe I used a couple of episodes ago. The main thing I need from the nether is actually electrum. Electrum has all sorts of uses, and I'm going to need it for a special alloy called blue alloy. I now realize for some reason I said electrum. It's like electroine, or, you know, where that blue dust stuff is. I essentially need that and electrum, that's where I was getting confused, to make some future items, including very powerful wires. As you can tell, my brain is just melted into nothingness because of how complicated it's getting. Here's another reason I decided to make all of that helium earlier on. Actually, it was originally for this, but, you know, obviously, it has tons of other uses. Anyways, I'm currently working on something super fascinating called superconductor base, for MV, of course. This is very much like the redstone alloy that I was using a ton of in LV, you know, the lossless cables. That's the best way to explain it. The problem is the higher tier you go, the more expensive these lossless cables become, and it's pretty obvious in this case. It starts out with some cadmium and manganese. It's pronounced like manganese, but it's like manganese. Whatever. I have to throw this stuff into the electric blast furnace, of course, to get ingots out of it, and I turned that into wires. But of course, I said this was a base, not the proper wire. You can still use this, but it's gonna suck compared to any other wire, really. Pretty much, I have to throw these into the assembling machine with stainless steel pipes, tiny ones specifically, helium, and electric pumps MV. And yeah, these make the full-blown MV superconductor, which is awesome. On top of that, instead of conducting only 1 amp, these lines can actually do 4 amps per, which is pretty insane, especially considering there's actually 0 power loss. It's pretty awesome, I have to say. Alright, this is very exciting. I'm getting extremely close to finally finishing up the clean room. This is going to be a massive leap in progression. Of course, I need all sorts of random little parts, including stainless steel and aluminum rotors, which is a bit ridiculous and very expensive. Then of course you have steel bars and item filters, which is also, again, ridiculous and expensive. A neat little thing about the clean room, at least for now, I don't know if it changes as it gets larger, I actually can just use LV power, it still has to be 2 amps of course, instead of like M or HV, which is very exciting. It took me a long time to figure out how to get the room like properly working. It says that you can embed an elevator in the floor. I tried that and it just never worked. I'd have to do some more testing. I would have liked to have a window as well, but some sort of combination here wasn't working out. The only problem with powering this thing at LV is that it works extremely slowly. It's going to take 9 seconds for 1%. And you heard me right, that is for 1%. Obviously, I'm going to need 100%. That's 900 seconds. That's a bit ridiculous. And for those of you who are curious, that's going to take 15 minutes. If I don't wait for the clean room to clean itself up, everything I make in there actually has a chance to just be deleted instead of succeeding, which would really suck. I have to say though, the biggest mistake I actually made building the clean room was going with MV machines. Yeah, I don't know why I didn't just put everything HV in there. Well, because it'd be super annoying and very expensive to run a power line in there, because I'd have to have like a decent high amperage one with low loss. I have a couple of options. My best one is absolutely electric steel, which does 2 amps with only 1 volt of loss, which is super good. But of course, it's technically 2 units of power lost per wire because of how the amperage works and everything. Long story, I'm gonna need like a 4 amp wire and then probably 4 generators or something like that. It's gonna get really stupid, but I have to move HV in here at some point. MV will work for a couple things, but unfortunately, most machines have to be HV in the clean room to be able to do all their special operations. It's a bit annoying, but yeah, I'm gonna have to do that in next episode. I didn't realize that I had to have all HV machines in here until a little bit. Well, it's kind of around now, but the thing is already cleaned out and done. I really don't feel like messing with it, so I decided to just deal with it. Thankfully, I can cut the phosphorus doped boules that I made way earlier on with just an HV machine. Unfortunately, I can't do that for everything, including like the chips from wafers in a little bit, but still, that's something. The biggest loser here is absolutely the laser engraver. The laser engraver and most of its recipes around here require HV, sadly. I'll explain the clean room and laser engraver in a tiny bit, but there are a few things I actually need before I can get to making that. So, I actually need ender pearl plates, and this is the crazy part, ender eye plates, which means I'm gonna have to use up a lot of my blaze powder, which really sucks. but I need these specialized plates so that I can actually throw them into the lathe. What do I need with Ender Eye and Ender Pearl plates? Well, they do some interesting stuff. These two lenses are required to make, guess what? Even more and complicated wafers so that I can cut them down into chips. I mean, we shouldn't be surprised at this point. And yes, you guys are seeing this right. I was using a steam compressor to make this thing. Not even the multi-block, just straight up a steam compressor, which I still find wild that it actually works for that recipe. I'm absolutely not complaining though. Okay, so how am I going to power the laser engraver in here? And why do I need to use batteries? So, the main rule about the clean room is that it has to stay clean. You can't put generators or anything that produces pollution in it, or then it'll get maintenance issues and shut down, you'll lose your clean and lose a lot of your products in there. So yeah, pretty bad. That's why I had to use a cable diode to put my MV power into this room. That's why I have those machines there. But unfortunately, I can't do that with the laser engraver. At least I was stupid and I didn't. So I'm using batteries, which is also stupid, but it works. And that's all that really matters here. I know that the machines themselves have a battery slot, but I built a battery buffer as well. I definitely should have made a way larger one instead of just a single slot. That's, man, I kind of just make all stupid decisions right here, don't I? Whatever. But, yeah, this is how I'm gonna use the laser engraver for a little bit until I finally cave and actually decide to make all the HV stuff I need to. I'd also have to set up like a benzene line all the way over here so that they stay powered. You can see why I chose the easy MV route for now. It's very nice that I can start using my beautiful phosphorus doped wafers because these things give me more, well, wafers as a byproduct, which is very nice. The phosphorus wafers are also required to make the other new wafers using the new lenses that I just made. On top of that, I actually decided to make another new lens, which isn't required right now, at least, but it will be useful at some point. That is, of course, the reinforced glass lens. The reinforced glass lens seems to have uses in rocket components like advanced wafers, which, funny thing, because that's from Galacticraft, it's completely separate from Gregtech wafers, but obviously they changed it to integrate, which I think is pretty neat. And yeah, I built a bunch of extra batteries. I'm charging them in all of my other HV machines. Essentially, I'm just gonna be in here for quite a while, micromanaging the machines, making sure they don't run out of battery. I won't lose any products since these are just normal machines, but obviously I don't want them to lose power and all of that progress. Still, this episode was extremely eventful and I got a ton of stuff done. Getting to HV is massive because I'm gonna spoil a tiny bit of stuff. The Gregtech players already know this, but I can actually get the next tier of circuits very soon, which seems very bizarre, right? Why would I be able to get, what, EV circuits or whatever is up next, like this fast? Honestly, I'm not sure the entire reasoning behind it, but I can get these circuits with just a few other new components. And that's going to be very important for making some of the new multi-block controllers. So yeah. Also, I don't know how I didn't have like enough footage for the one part where I was making the chemicals. I guess I should have explained it there, but I was making like a PTFE. It's a different type of plastic, like the next tier up. It requires hydrogen fluoride, which we all know, and then chloroform, which is why I had to make the methane. It's a combination of that methane that I made and chlorine, funnily enough. And then when I put those two together, I get the PTFE, but I also get a ton of hydrogen chloride as an output, or I guess byproduct. Conveniently though, this is Gregtech and I can actually just throw that in the electrolyzer to get my chlorine and, well, hydrogen back. But yeah, I don't really have anything else to do right now. This is the end of the video. I made a bunch more wafers and everything like that off camera, but I hope you guys enjoyed watching this video because I had a ton of fun playing and editing it. Even though it takes a very long time to edit these, of course, it is still very fun. My favorite part of editing videos is actually the music mixing at the end, so I hope you guys enjoyed all of it. And of course, thank you all for watching. I seriously appreciate it. And of course, a special thank you to all of my channel members. Anyways, this is going to be Enzo from LookIntoGaming, signing out.